Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, distinguished guests and participants, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to ACE webinar on hydrogen in ASEAN, economic prospects, development, and applications. I hope all of you are safe and in good health. My name is Gabriela Inanto. I'm the Associate Officer of Power, Fossil Fuel, Alternative Energy and Storage, or PFS Department at the ASEAN Center for Energy, and I will be the Master of Ceremony for today's webinar. We have a very special guest today, Mr. Jonathan Goh from Energy Market Authority Singapore, who will open our webinar with his remarks along with ACE Executive Director Dr. Nuki. We are very pleased to have Mr. Jonathan Goh joining us today despite his busy schedule. This webinar is a special event as we will launch our report with the title of Hydrogen in ASEAN, Economic Prospects, Development and Applications. The main authors will present the findings of the report to provide initial status of hydrogen development in ASEAN, which then will be followed by the deep and comprehensive discussion with exceptional panelists from various backgrounds. At the end of the panel discussion, there will be a Q&A session with the audience. I would like to encourage all participants to raise your questions at any time in the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. The moderator will then convey your questions to the panelists during the Q&A session. The panelists are also very much welcome to answer the questions directly in the Q&A feature. Before we get started, please allow me to inform you on some guidelines for our webinar today. First, all speakers should ensure there will not be any background noises, and I would suggest everyone to put your devices on silent mode. Second, all speakers should mute their microphones and only unmute if they wish to present or speak. Without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Nuki Agiautama, the Executive Director of the ASEAN Center for Energy, to deliver the first opening remark. Please, Dr. Nuki, the time is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Honorable Mr. Jonathan Goh, Co-Chair, Singapore's National Officials on Energy, Soil Leaders, and the Director of External Relations of Energy Market Authority, Singapore, distinguished panelists from IEA, ARENA, APOC, and HDF Energy, colleagues from ASEAN, REPP SSN, prominent participants, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. On behalf of the ASEAN Center for Energy, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to launch our latest report, Hydrogen in ASEAN, Economic Prospects, Development and Applications. In the last couple of decades, energy demand in the region has soared in tandem with its rapid economic growth, modernization, and population increases. According to our flagship projects, the 6th ASEAN Energy Outlook, last year launched, the fossil fuel will dominate the energy mix until 2040. However, the 10 governments of the ASEAN member states are nonetheless hoping to transition to higher shares of RE in their energy mix. By 2025, they are planning to have 23% share of RE in the total primary energy supply and 35% share of the RE in installed power capacity through the deploying large-scale RE system, accommodating higher shares of RE in the ASEAN power grid, increasing RE investment, and exploring new and emerging energy technologies such as hydrogen. The concept of hydrogen plus fuel cell electric vehicles offer a complementary solution towards electrifying the transport sector. Hydrogen and fuel cell technologies have essential advantages in the application to vehicles. And apart from that, the fact that the energy intensity of hydrogen is higher than that of gasoline. Refueling can be done as quickly as for petrol and diesel engines. Solving the issues of EV for the long haul and heavy duty also can be answered by this technology. The source of producing hydrogen is crucial. When hydrogens come from renewable resource, all the fuel in vehicles could be close to or even truly achieve zero emission. The member states are rich in energy resource that can be mobilized to supply both blue and green hydrogens and power the transport sector by applying fuel cell technologies. To produce green hydrogen from RE, the region possesses more than 200 gigawatt potential of geothermal, approximately 158 gigawatt of hydropower, including small hydro, and 61 gigawatt of biomass, as well as including huge theoretical potential of solar and wind power. This technology will play a significant role in the regional energy landscape in the future. Hence, it is our responsibility in ACE to continuously provide insight and analysis for the policymakers, business leaders, and all stakeholders. This activity is fully supported by the ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project, or ASEP, which aims to support ASEAN in improving the coherence between the ASEAN's energy and climate policies and contribute to more climate-friendly development of the energy sectors. It is part of the key strategies under the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, or APAI, particularly Program Area Number 6, the Regional Energy Policy and Planning, or REPP. And it is also aligned with the priorities for the energy sectors outlined by Brunei Darussalam as the ASEAN Chair in 2021. This study is only the beginning of our research focus on hydrogens, and we will continue to assess the potential to harness the utilization of hydrogens in the region. We do realize the need for collaboration from all stakeholders, and therefore we are thankful to all panelists who are joining us today to share their insight, and we hope to continue the discussion through the ACE expert panel on hydrogen that ACE is going to establish. And for this, we would like to welcome the involvement of the participation of all of you working on the same topics. Once again, thank you very much for your kind attention. Stay safe and stay healthy. Back to you, Gaby.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nuki, for delivering such a great speech. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Jonathan Go Boucher to deliver his opening remark. Mr. Jonathan Go is the Senior Official on Energy, or SOE Leader of Singapore, and he is also the Director of External Relations of Energy Market Authority Singapore. Please, Mr. Jonathan Go, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Gabriel, and also Pak Nuki for the introduction. Good afternoon to everyone. Well, Excellencies and distinguished guests, colleagues from ACE, the ASEAN Centre of Energy, Dr. Nuki, Executive Director of the ASEAN Centre of Energy. Thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar on hydrogen in ASEAN. First, I would like to congratulate ACE on the launch of the report. I think this analysis by ACE is timely, and I commend Pak Nuki and the ACE team for following up on this important topic of hydrogen as endorsed in the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation Phase 2, 2021-2025, and specifically under one of the key activities of the Regional Energy Planning and Policy Subsector Network. Now, as a region, ASEAN faces unique challenges in the pathway to decarbonization. Against the backdrop of rapid economic development and rising energy demand, ASEAN has set out ambitious renewables share and energy intensity reduction targets under the APAI. To this end, low carbon fuels such as hydrogen will contribute to support the region's sustainable energy transition. Today, while hydrogen is a much discussed topic, many challenges remain. First, global supply chains for hydrogen need to be established. Second, extensive infrastructure for hydrogen import, storage, transport, and end use need to be in place. In particular, the deployment of hydrogen in the power sector will require significant investments in new infrastructure. Last but not least, the current price of producing and importing or trading hydrogen is high, making wider adoption difficult. Now, Singapore views hydrogen as an important energy solution as part of our energy story. We conducted a joint study on hydrogen imports and downstream applications in Singapore in 2019. The study found that low-carbon hydrogen offers a solution for hard-to-decarbonize sectors of the economy, including the power, industry, and transportation sectors. The study also provided an in-depth assessment of the cost, technological readiness, and potential applications of various hydrogen carriers such as liquefied hydrogen and ammonia. To support our local research community to develop and test bed promising low carbon energy technologies, including hydrogen technologies. Now we have announced a 49 million Singapore dollars low carbon energy research fund. We are also strengthening our international partnerships on this front, including signing memorandum of understanding with Australia, Chile, and New Zealand to work together on practical projects to develop hydrogen markets, supply chains, and standards. Now, given the important role hydrogen can play in ASEAN and its clean energy transition, I hope that this report will be able to shed some lights and insights on the potential applications and viability of hydrogen in the various economic sectors. Now, the ACE team, thereafter could also use this report to initiate further cooperation on hydrogen with our dialogue partners and international organizations. Now, I encourage everyone to participate actively in today's discussion. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jonathan Goh, for opening this webinar with a wonderful speech. Before we move on to the next session, I would like to invite all speakers to turn on your cameras as we are going to take a picture together. My colleague, Ms. Nella, will assist us in taking the photo.
Hi, YB. Yes, thank you so much. So I would like to invite everyone to turn on your camera, please. Be ready in 3, 2, 1. One more time. 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much, and back to you, Gabriela.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Nella. Now, the moment we've been waiting for. I'm very excited to announce the launch of our report entitled Hydrogen in ASEAN, Economic Prospects, Development, and Applications. I would like to briefly introduce the two main authors from ACE, Mr. Adityo Gilang Baskoro and Mr. Suwanto. Mr. Adityo Gilang Baskoro is a technical officer of PFS department at ACE. He is a master graduate from the University of Melbourne, majoring in energy systems with primary expertise in energy system analysis and petroleum engineering. In ACE, he experienced in leading several projects on the topics of ASEAN Solar PV Study, Hydrogen in ASEAN, and ASEAN Major Countries Energy Corporation Assessment. He is also involved in other energy-related projects such as promoting the higher efficient air conditioners, ASEAN virtual power plant knowledge sharing, and etc. Another main author is Mr. Suwanto, who is also the technical officer of PFS department at ACE. He is an energy enthusiast as he has the background in both non-renewable and renewable energy. He holds a master's degree from the University of Freiburg, Germany, majoring in sustainable systems engineering. Prior to his master's degree, he was working as a petroleum engineer at Chevron Indonesia for around 6 years. He decided to learn about sustainable energy after the introduction of solar PV application in remote region during his one-year voluntary program. Now, I would like to turn over the microphone to both Mr. Adityo and Mr. Suwanto to present the findings of the report. Please, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, JP, for the introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we would like to present and launch the report of our study. Okay. First slide. No. Previews. Yes. Okay. Today we'd like to present and launch the report of our study entitled Hydrogen in ASEAN, Economic Prospects, Development, and Applications. This report is developed by ASEAN Center for Energy and it's fully supported by ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project, or ACCEP. And we hope that this report can be utilized as the initial guidance for ASEAN countries in exploring hydrogen opportunities in the region. Next slide, please. In this presentation, we start by introducing the background of this study, followed by some highlights why ASEAN needs hydrogen. And then we'll share about the concept of this study, some key findings, and key takeaways regarding the result. And we conclude the presentation by showing the recommendation in the form of regional policy roadmap on hydrogen development in ASEAN. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. As explained before on the welcoming remark by our executive director, that hydrogen is one of the key priority topic under ASEAN Plan of Action on Energy Cooperation or Phase 2 that cover program area number 5 and 6 about renewable energy and regional energy policy and planning, where ASEAN is exploring new and emerging energy technologies such as hydrogen and fuel cells. And then according to the 6th ASEAN Energy Outlook, ASEAN will remain dependent on fossil fuel as the main energy source. Therefore, hydrogen is inevitable for decarbonizing energy systems, since hydrogen is one of the key energy source in industrial and transport. And then moreover, hydrogen start to be emerging technology in ASEAN. As we saw, Brunei Darussalam, for example, has started to export hydrogen to Japan, and then Singapore has a trial the hydrogen for shipping, and also Petronas reported to invest on hydrogen as part of carbon-free energy goals. Next slide. So why ASEAN needs hydrogen? To answer this question, we look at about the source of hydrogen itself. And we identified that ASEAN has resource base to develop indigenous gray, blue, and green hydrogen. For example, we see on the table that installed renewable energy from hydro, solar, and wind, geothermal, and biomass in ASEAN is growing from now to 2040. And then ASEAN also has relevant infrastructures like gas pipelines and LNG liquefaction plants, as drawn in Trans-ASEAN gas pipelines, and could be adapted for the early stages of hydrogen energy development. And then in the recent year, we observed a progressive development on hydrogen technology, which made a combined cost of hydrogen and fuel cell electric vehicle has been declining and become attractive in road transportation. And if we have integrated hydrogen refueling station and fuel cell electric vehicle, we could create some like sustainable road transportation and could reduce the emission from transport sector. And then in the power sector, hydrogen could be used as an energy storage and act as a future energy supply. And it is beneficial during a mismatch period or during peak periods, since we already know that renewable energy has intermittent production. And blue hydrogen, by utilizing CCS or CCUS or carbon capture storage, this concept seems also potential in ASEAN regions, since we identified huge geological storage in Indonesia and then Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam, even though we should spend more on the investment. However, ASEAN region has the opportunity to develop CCS hub of surrounding regions, and we see the value added when the application of CCUS to EOR or enhanced oil recovery applications. Next slide, please. This study examined the economic feasibility of gray, blue, and green hydrogen based on the latest development technologies when it is applied in power sector as storage, transportation as fuel, and also for export business. And for the overview, gray hydrogen can be formed from natural gas or coal gasification. Then blue hydrogen is basically gray hydrogen plus CS. Green hydrogen itself is taken from renewables, and detailed application in each sector are explained in the next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, in the power sector, as shown in the flow chart, the energy from renewables is used to generate the hydrogen either from forecourt or centralized. Then hydrogen can be directly used or stored. The difference between a forecourt and centralized is mainly in the production capacity. In forecourt production, the electricity is generated using either fuel cells or gas turbines and is injected into the power grid with transmission lines. In centralized production, hydrogen production facility is designed located near the renewable energy sources. The hydrogen is subsequently transported to the generators near the electricity demand center and converted back into the electricity. The levelized cost of electricity that's injected into the power grid is compared to the cost of two alternative energy storage from lithium batteries and also pumped hydro. Next slide, please. In transport sector, we see that hydrogen has several advantages. For example, that hydrogen has a higher energy intensity than gasoline. Then also refueling can be done as quick as gasoline and diesel engines. This combination of two advantages also makes hydrogen and fuel cell vehicles suitable for long distance or heavy duty trips. Hydrogen could be applicable in railways, aviation, shipping, and also drones. And green hydrogen could also help to achieve zero emission. And from the flowchart, resulted hydrogen, either gray, blue, or green, is then transported into hydrogen refueling station where we can do refueling the vehicle. The economic analysis is by comparing hydrogen costs from different hydrogen production with different types of fleets, for example, passenger cars, buses, and trucks. We also analyze other key performances like cost of ownership and carbon emission with various hydrogen supply pathways. Next slide, please. Lastly, we also analyze hydrogen export opportunity from ASEAN to other regions. Apart from domestic application, we want to know alternative scenario to export the hydrogen. In this report, we examined hydrogen export to East Asia market, to China, Japan, and South Korea. In the analysis, we assume reduction on renewable energy costs and the electricity is sourced from curtailed intermittent renewables. For the next slides, my colleague, Mr. Aditya, will explain the result as well as some key takeaways and policy recommendations. Mr. Aditya, the floor is yours. Sorry, Mr. Aditya.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Mr. Swanto, for your presentation, and good afternoon to all participants. First of all, may I check if my audio is clear enough?
Yes.
Okay, may I request to the next slide, please? Okay, the next slides will be discussing more on the findings of our study in different application of hydrogen. And here, the first is the application of hydrogen for power storage. As mentioned earlier in the previous presentation, the hydrogen could be stored for renewable energy in the form of gases or liquid, and then use the hydrogen to generate electricity. In this analysis, we'll calculating the LCOE of storing renewable in all ASEAN countries, and then comparing it to the current technologies such as battery and hydro. In the bar charts, as you can see in this slide, there are two bars inside the green box, and the two boxes is the hydrogen storage system, where the blue one is the hydrogen with the fuel cell technology, and the gray one is hydrogen with gas turbine. From this figure, we can simply say that the cost of hydrogen for power storage is way higher compared to lithium battery and pumped hydro in all ASEAN countries under current condition. In average, hydrogen with fuel cell technology will cost around $1.47 per kilowatt hour and $0.51 per kilowatt hour when the hydrogen is burned with a gas turbine. Comparing it to the lithium battery that only costs $0.42 per kilowatt hour and pumped hydro for only $0.30 per kilowatt hour. And we have to know that in current state, the technology for utility scale of fuel cell and 100% of hydrogen for gas turbine is not commercially available in the market. Next slide, please. Next is the analysis of the hydrogen application for transportation. In this case, we are calculating the total cost of ownership that include the all costs such as capital costs, fuel, insurance, maintenance, and others, and also the carbon emission in the three types of vehicles, namely passenger car, bus, and truck. And we're considering three type of engine, four type of engine, namely fuel cell that will use hydrogen, and BEF, which is battery electric vehicle, then a hybrid electric vehicle, and lastly is the internal combustion engine. From the hydrogen itself, we have 8 categories for hydrogen based on its production method, as you can see in the legend of this graph. 1 is forecourt renewable energy electrolysis. 2 is to forecourt natural gas. 3 is centralized renewable energy. 4 is centralized natural gas. 5 is centralized coal gasification. 6 is centralized biomass gasification. 7 is centralized natural gas. 8 is centralized coal gasification with CCS technology. And we're comparing it with the battery electric vehicle, hybrid electric vehicle, and internal combustion engine. The figure here is only showing you the result from Indonesia, but in the report, we do have more analysis for other countries in ASEAN. From this analysis, we observe that in general, the TCO per kilometer for fuel cell is still high, which is 2 to 3 times higher than the conventional vehicles with gasoline and diesel. And second, the TCO per kilometer for fuel cell trucks appear to be competitive against battery electric trucks in some occasions, as you can see in this figure. And lastly, considering the emission, when the fuel cell electric vehicle is used with the green hydrogen, when it's produced on site with electrolysis, and in this case, we are considering the P1 model. As you can see in this figure, is the far left on each vehicle. The carbon emission from fuel cell vehicle are the lowest compared to other type of engines. It is about 10 to 15% of the carbon emission of gasoline or diesel vehicle, and the emission are also only 20 to 30% from battery electric vehicles. Next slide, please. And next, we deeper analyze to comparing on the buses and trucks, because the hydrogen is most likely to be developed to serve the long, heavy vehicles such as buses and trucks. As we know, there are operating hydrogen buses in several countries such as Japan, but for the truck is still under development. In the figure, there are bars inside the green box that representing the hydrogen vehicle using fuel cell, and the color representing the type of the hydrogen, namely gray, blue, and green hydrogen. Comparing again with the BEF, the battery electric vehicle, hybrid electric vehicle, and also internal combustion engine, it's clearly you can see that the hydrogen application for buses and truck is still not economically attractive, because the hydrogen fuel cell price is still 3 times higher than the current diesel bus and truck, that make it less competitive in this application. Next slide, please. And lastly, we are considering to analyze the application of hydrogen for export market. In this case, we are calculating the hydrogen cost in all ASEAN countries by considering the transport costs from ASEAN to the advanced markets such as Japan, China, and South Korea. And we are only showing you the 3 types of hydrogen, namely gray, blue, and green hydrogen. Well, in the report, we do have more detailed analysis in this application. From this analysis, in 2020, we observed that Brunei Darussalam and Indonesia could produce the gray hydrogen at the lower cost than around $5 per kilogram among other ASEAN countries, due to the abundant resources of fossil fuel, especially natural gas. And this cost is quite attractive for the Japan market, because the price of gasoline in Japan is around $6.2 per gallon and $5.3 for diesel. And we can directly compare this fuel to 1 kilogram of hydrogen, because a similar energy content in 1 gallon of gasoline to the 1 kilogram of hydrogen. And lastly, we are considering to do 2030 scenarios when the area electricity is predicted to be decreased by 70%, and also the capex of hydrogen production by 50% by as predicted in many studies and research. And the green hydrogen price could be reduced by 49% from the average of $10.2 per kilogram to $5 per kilogram in ASEAN region. So this implies the business opportunities for ASEAN countries for the export market. Next slide, please. And from our study, we can conclude that one, the application of hydrogen for electricity storage and transportation is not economically attractive to the current alternatives. Two, the gray hydrogen produced from countries such as Brunei Darussalam and Indonesia could already be competitive for export market. In the future, as the cost of hydrogen storage and transportation fall, gray hydrogen production could be upgraded to the blue hydrogen with CCS technology to mitigate the emission and still maintaining a competitive level of supply cost to the overseas market. And three, in view of both expected decrease in capex of hydrogen production, transportation, and the LCOE of renewable energy in next decade, and the formation of hydrogen energy market overseas, such as in China, Japan, and South Korea, hydrogen produced in ASEAN countries and supplied to those overseas market could become competitive again fossil fuels. Next slide, please. And in the report, we do also provide recommendation to develop policy implication to develop a regional policy roadmap. In this case, we divided into 3 phases, while the first phase is in timeline of 2021 to 2025 to develop on more green hydrogen. The countries with advantage with term of fossil fuel resources and scale of existing infrastructure, such as gas pipeline and LNG plant, would consider developing capacity in producing and exporting gray hydrogen. It is to develop and establish a transportation system for exporting hydrogen for ASEAN to other countries, and also to gain revenue to develop more advanced technologies such as green hydrogen in the next phase. In the phase 2, in the timeline of 2025 to 2030, considering to develop a blue hydrogen to mitigate the emission using the CCS or CCS technology. And lastly, in the phase 3, on 2030 onward, with expected significant decline on renewable energy in ASEAN countries, as well as the decline of hydrogen production costs, hydrogen from electrolysis could be deployed in energy storage for intermittent renewables to provide auxiliary grid services and also for export market. I think this is the last of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. I really hope that we are having a fruitful discussion today, and I will pass the presentation to Gabriela. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adityo and Mr. Suwanto, for the fantastic presentation on the newly launched report on hydrogen in ASEAN. To further discuss the economic prospect and the potential for utilizing hydrogen in the energy transition in ASEAN, I would like to introduce the moderator for the panel discussion today, Mr. Benny Suryadi. Mr. Benny is currently the manager of PFS department at ACE. He has over 10 years of experience managing research and programs related to energy, power, and climate change in Southeast Asia, supporting the countries in accelerating their energy transition. Mr. Benny also managed 2 ASEAN major projects, the ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project, or ACCEPT, which is the first integrated energy and climate change project in ASEAN, and the ASEAN Interconnection Master Plan Study, or AIMS-3, which is the regional blueprint for electricity interconnection in the region. Previously, he was the team leader on the development of the ASEAN Energy Outlook. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Benny to take over the microphone and lead the panel discussion. Please, Mr. Benny, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone from Jakarta. Greeting to wherever you are joining with us on the launching of the report, the Hydrogen in ASEAN, Economic Prospect, Development and Application. So this is the first kind of the report on the hydrogen that we are developing. in the context of the Southeast Asia. And as Excellency Jonathan mentioned, this will be a starting point as we will continue to conduct research and study on the hydrogen to optimize its role in the energy mix in the region. I have a privilege and honor to become a moderator for our panel discussion, where joining with us a great lineup of the global and regional experts on the hydrogen who are going to share their views on their work on the hydrogen and give an insight then how we can utilize, optimize the hydrogen in ASEAN. So joining with us, Dr. Uwe Reme from the IEA, Mr. Emmanuel Bianco from the IRENA, Mr. Nabi Matusin from UPPERT, Mr. Matthew Gezi from the HDF Energy, and Dr. Yan Fei Lee from the area. So as to kick off the discussion, then I will start with inviting our panelists to give their introductory remark to further introduce their work, especially related on the issue of the hydrogen. So I will start with Dr. Uwe Reme. If I may introduce a bit that maybe Dr. Reme is the acting head of the Hydrogen and Alternative Fuels Unit at the International Energy Agency, and he leads the energy supply analysis and modeling within the Energy Technology Perspective projects. ETP, I think, is one of the major studies being referred by many energy stakeholders in the region. And before his current assignment, he was the energy modeler at the IEA and contributed as a lead author to various IEA publications. Prior to joining the IEA, he worked as a researcher at the University of Stuttgart. Dr. Reme studied chemical engineering at the Hagen University and also Carnegie Mellon University, Pittsburgh, and completes a PhD degree in mechanical engineering at the University of Stuttgart. So, Dr. Reme, may I invite you for the 7 minutes for your introductory remark, please.
Thank you very much, Benny, for this very kind introduction. And let me first welcome everyone and also congratulate the Asian Center for Energy for this excellent report. Because if you look at hydrogen today, it can be used from various fuels, almost from all fuels. It can be used from fossil fuels, from renewables, even from nuclear energy, and it can also be used in almost every part of our energy system today. So it can be produced, as pointed out earlier, to produce electricity, also to store electricity, to produce heat in buildings and industry. It can be used in the transport sector, it can be used as feedstock in industry. So it's a very versatile energy carrier. And of course, also raises the question where it makes sense to use it, how to produce it and how to use it. And I guess against this background, it's important to understand what are the regional or national circumstances, conditions, how hydrogen can be produced and how it can be used. And I guess, therefore, this study, like the one from ACE, is important to understand which role hydrogen can play in the region and for the countries in the region. At the IEA, of course, we also work on the topic of hydrogen. We released earlier this year, or showed in our net zero roadmap, how the world could reach net zero emissions in the energy sector by 2050. And hydrogen plays an important role in this pathway to net zero. It covers around 30% of global final energy needs in 2050 at net zero. And it's particularly important to decarbonize parts of the energy system where direct electrification is more difficult. So we talk there about heavy industries, but also long distance transport. Just to give you very few numbers, for example, ammonia in our net zero pathways covers almost 50% of global energy demand in shipping. synthetic kerosene being produced from hydrogen, and carbon cover around 1/3 of the global aviation energy need in the aviation sector. And also in industry, hydrogen plays an important role, covering 40% of the energy needs in the chemical sector, or around 20% in the production of iron and steel. So I guess this illustrates already that hydrogen can play an important role in various parts of the energy sector, particularly again where direct electrification is, or direct use of electricity is more difficult. Of course, it requires also rapid scale up in the production of hydrogen. So in our net zero scenario, global hydrogen demand almost increases by a factor of 5. So from around 90 megatons of hydrogen today to around 500 megatons of hydrogen in 2050. 1 megaton of hydrogen is always a bit abstract unit. I mean, just to give you some reference, the energy amount of 1 megaton of hydrogen can fuel more than 6 million fuel cell vehicles for a year. So it's really a huge amount of energy we're talking about here. And by 2050, in our net zero pathway, hydrogen is almost entirely produced from low carbon energy sources. So 60% is coming from water electrolyzers, so being produced from low carbon electricity, and 40% in combination with CCS. And this requires really a rapid scale up for both technologies, both technology pathways. So in terms of electrolyzer capacity, we reach in 2050 at net zero capacity of 3,600 gigawatts globally. Just for comparison, today our estimate for the global electrolyzer capacity in the energy sector is 0.3. So we compare 0.3 gigawatt today to 3,600 gigawatt by 2050. That's really a rapid and massive scale up needed. A similar scale up is also needed if we want to use fossil fuels in combination with CCS to produce hydrogen. So there we see that around almost 2 gigatons of CO2 are captured from natural gas to produce hydrogen in 2050 at net zero. So again, these are quite large numbers. And what needs to happen, or what needs to be done to achieve this? I guess one important point is here that we shouldn't forget that hydrogen is already being used today in the energy system. So hydrogen is being used in refineries, it's used in the chemical industry to produce fertilizers. And the existing users today, as I said before, is around 90 megatons of hydrogen today, and provides kind of stepping stone for scaling up the production of low carbon hydrogen. So to replace the current unabated production of hydrogen from fossil fuels by low carbon hydrogen production, so either retrofitting existing plants with CO2 capture and storage, or producing hydrogen from renewable electricity through water electrolyzers. That's already very interesting opportunities to scale up hydrogen production, and that will bring also down the costs of low carbon hydrogen over the next decade. Having said that, I guess I will leave it at that, and I guess we will touch various aspects of the opportunities and challenges of hydrogen during the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed. I noted that it could be addressing the sectors that will be challenging, and this one the scalable also. Then I think next I would like to move to our second panelist, Mr. Emmanuel Bianco. He is a program officer at the International Renewable Energy Agency in the Policy and Renewable Energy Market Unit. His areas of interest cover the renewable energy policy issue across the whole spectrum of the energy system, in particular the system integration challenge. He is the author of the recent IRENA report on the hydrogen. This is the report that being referred for us as well in the region, particularly the IRENA Green Hydrogen Guides to Policy. This will outline the main barrier that inhibiting the green hydrogen uptake and the policy needed to address the issue. Mr. Emmanuel, that's I'd like to invite for 7 minutes also for you to share your introductory remark. And I understand you have a slide, so I will think we'll run it for you.
Thank you. Yes, I have some slides just to introduce some of the topic that here in Arena we are discussing, because when the last 2 years have been quite some interesting years for us that are interested in the topic of hydrogen. We noticed that there was a little gap on the discussion about policy making. So the actual measures policymakers should consider in order to actually kickstart a sector that for now is very little compared to what it can do for the decarbonization of the energy sector and the planet at large. So we started assessing what are the actual measures that policymakers can introduce and how to, in order to make these ideas a reality. So next slide, please. Let's start with some numbers coming from our World Energy Transitions Outlook. And here we see why hydrogen is so important, because for how much we use renewables and energy efficiency and electrification, hydrogen still needs to be deployed to reduce the global emissions by 10% by 2050. So hydrogen has a role to make in order to achieve the net zero emission system that we strongly need in order to safeguard our planet. However, there is a sector, for how important it is, still faces important barriers. And next slide, please. We are lucky enough to say that some of the barriers that this sector faces are similar to those that were faced by the renewable energy sector in the past. So we start by having some understanding on how to address them. The more important barrier remains the cost barrier, which are very well felt by the first movers, so by those developers that are now developing the first electrolyzers. Yeah, I should have said this before. This report focuses only on green hydrogen. And another barrier that is very important and faced by basically everyone is the infrastructure barrier, because for now we don't have a very large network to exchange hydrogen either regionally or between cities. So these are some of the main barriers. And there is another one that instead was not faced by the renewable energy sector. Next slide, please. And it's the chicken and egg problem. For now, we have basically no production of green hydrogen, or not nearly close to the scale we need, which is around 400 megatons by 2050 or 5 terawatt of electrolyzers, which is 20,000 times more than the current installed capacity. We have no infrastructure, as I said, or very little, and there is actually very little demand or value recognition for it. No one, the actual demand for green hydrogen in the various end uses is still very low in reality. And as we can see here, there are actually a lot of possible end uses in the industry, in the transport sector, in heating for high-grade heating in industry, and even for someone in low-grade heating for the residential sector and the power generation. The private sector is the first movers are basically solving this issue by co-locating everything together and making their own demand meeting their own production. But there is, for the scale of green hydrogen we need actions to actually break this cycle where no demand because of the high cost maintains the investment in the electrolyzers too low to achieve that scale that would drive the cost down. So it's important among the various measures to make to have some priority setting by policymakers, understand what uses of hydrogen are actually important in order to focus on those first in order to move the sector ahead. Hydrogen valleys are another options where all demand is conglomerated within one area and reduce the need for infrastructure. Next slide, please. And another important measure, and this is going to become a fashion, is introducing a hydrogen strategy. And we're seeing these strategies being developed quite rapidly around the world in the last years. And as we speak now, around 40 countries are developing their own national strategy that will position themselves and provide a vision on what the hydrogen sector will look like in the future. Not all these elements will find will become real by 2050, but at least it's a kick-starting point. It's a way to set ourselves, to project ourselves into the future. And next slide, please. An important element for this in these strategies are the presence of targets. Targets have become an important element in every renewable energy policy because they present for policymakers an idea of for investors, an idea of where to invest first and where there is an environment fit for their investments. We have seen the EU hydrogen strategy with 40 gigawatt plus 40 gigawatt in neighboring countries, and the Chilean strategy with 25 gigawatt by 2030. Together, these make 105 gigawatt, which is only, well, very little compared to the 5 terawatts of what is needed by 2050. So there is a larger part of a larger area for investors around the world to invest in the next years, because we will really need these electrolyzers to be developed quickly. And indeed, I would like to say that these targets should not be seen, however, as a cap by 2030. They should be seen as a floor. This kind of targets should be seen as a minimum requirement for the future. Still, the barriers exist, and for this, in IRENA, we started on assessing what are these barriers and how to address them, and what are the policy measures possible for policymakers to assist the development of these electrolyzers. We wrote the Green Hydrogen Supply Guide to Policymaking, which is a second report from the first one, and we are developing others for industry and for low-going transport, and more probably will come. We already identified more than 50 policies with a roadmap for each subsectors. And by fall, we will have published the Green Hydrogen for Industry 1. And the next slide, please. Just as a preview among these 50 policies that we identified, though, one is very simple to understand because it's a common feature in renewable energy policymaking. Auctions, feed-in tariff, feed-in premium provided a way to actually decrease the cost of solar PV and wind. And here there is a comparison between the average cost of auctions in the last 10 years, actually from 2010 to 2019, and the cost of green hydrogen, let's say the best green hydrogen that we now can produce. So even if we take a $6 per kilogram tariff for green hydrogen, the cost will be $180 per megawatt hour, which is below what we were used to pay for solar PV, both if we consider the feed-in tariffs in the 2000s and the auctions from 2010 until 2013. And with auctions and feed-in tariffs, as we can see with the blue line, PV tariffs decreased, PV cost decreased, and a similar cost decline is possible for green hydrogen too. There's another report from IRENA, Green Hydrogen Cost Reduction, which shows how this can be achieved within the time frame of the energy transition. So next slide, please. Actually, let's also say that for green hydrogen, what we are seeing is that we are going to have an international dimension. Every country wants to sell, buy, consume hydrogen. There are a lot of going on in that direction, and for sure, the Southeast Asia region is part of this. Is where some of these lines really interconnect. Maybe I went too long, so I'm sorry for that. But I wanted to showcase what is going on with the green hydrogen world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. That's going to be, yeah, indeed, time is challenging with us. But I hope several countries in the region can also on your list about having the strategies or vision about the hydrogen in the near future, or what we aspire is also a regional context. Thank you, Emmanuel. Next, I will move to Mr. Muhammad Nabi Fakhri Matusin. He's a visiting researcher at the Asia Pacific Energy Research Center in Tokyo, Japan. He holds a bachelor degree in system engineering from Loughborough University and a master science degree from Durham University in UK. He has a 6-year experience as a researcher at the Brunei National Energy Research Institute, where he conducts a number of research on renewable energy, energy efficiency, and climate change. Since early this year, Mr. Nabi is joining with upper in Tokyo, Japan. Mr. Nabi, you also have a 5 to 7 minutes for your introductory remark.
Thank you, Mr. Benny, and good afternoon and good morning to wherever you are. My name is Nabi. I'm working as a researcher at the Asia Pacific Energy Research Center in Tokyo, Japan. So similar to both Dr. Remy and Mr. Bianco, we are here in airport also conducting studies on hydrogen, which is as part of our project on developing energy and demand supply outlook for the APEC region. So hydrogen is we have actually started including hydrogen in the seventh edition of the demand and supply outlook in 2019. So for the next outlook, we are also looking into expanding the use of hydrogen in the 8th edition, which is going to be published in early next year, 2022. So just to briefly highlight what our results of hydrogen in the 7th outlook is that we in our 7th edition, we can see that hydrogen is one of the most important fuels. It's so much important that you can see that by 2050 we can expect that transportation sector will represent about 88% of the total hydrogen demand in the business as usual scenario, and with the majority, like 79% of this demand will be coming from China. So also the increase of hydrogen use in the transport sector also has the largest impact on passenger vehicles, the FCVs, which make up about 2.1% of the vehicle fleet by 2050. Aside from transport sector, hydrogen demand is also prominent in building sector. You can see that the demand will increase to about 0.28 million tons of oil equivalent, but it will also decrease dramatically in overall share of hydrogen from 56% to about 6.8%. That's because of the significant emergence of demands from the transport sector. But we did also a scenario where we applied some more ambitious efforts in the 7th edition, which we call it as a 2-degree scenario. So in this case, we can see that the overall demand for hydrogen in this scenario is about 75% higher than in the business as usual scenario. And similarly, you can see that transportation sector is still continue to be the most dominant sector in this scenario. However, you can see that building sector will start to emerge gradually. That is reflected in the more rapid growth in hydrogen use in residential buildings and also the industry sector as well. So hopefully in our next edition of the energy and demand, in our next edition of the outlook, we will see more hydrogen penetration. That's because of you can see that most of the economies have updated their policies in terms of hydrogen. So we will expect some surge in the hydrogen demand in the next outlook. So I think that's all from me. So thank you, Benny.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ravi. That's going to be, I mean, the finding from the upward energy supply and demand outlook is also one of the reference. So it's good to learn that how this hydrogen is playing a significant role in the future as well. Then I move to Mr. Matthew. This is Vice President Asia, PP Asia at HDF Energy, a French independent power producer dedicated to the generation of the clean and firm power. Matthew has over 10 years of experience in renewable energy through various positions within IPP, EPC, and key supplier companies. Prior to joining HDF Energy in 2018, Matthew also managed the development of the Moroccan and Bulgarian subsidiary of a French developer and EPC. Then for the 4 years, he was business development manager at ArcelorMittal Extrusions. Matthew, I understand you have a slide that you want to run, so I'm over to you. So you have 7 minutes as well to share your work related on hydrogen.
Thank you, Benny, for the kind introduction, and thank you, ASEAN Center of Energy, for the invitation. I will share a few slides for the introduction. Well, I see you did it. So please, next slide, please. So a few words to describe our background and the view, also the context of our view on the market. We are developer and IPP of power plants. So we combine renewable energies and hydrogen storage to deliver megawatt hour. Next, please. So the previous speakers explained that very well. I will spare you the blah blah again, but in a few words, the positive sides, the great added value of hydrogen is the versatility. We can decarbonize many sectors with hydrogen, from mobility to industrial application and power sector. On our side, we focus on power sector application because we believe it's a way to implement green hydrogen projects from today without subsidies in the right context. And we want to make that very clear because we know that for some countries, it can be very difficult sometimes to determine where to start with green hydrogen, whether it's mobility, industrial application, or power. On our side, we push for power sector. Next, please. That also was very well mentioned by Emmanuel, but in a few words, we see that is not a question if green hydrogen will be deployed globally. We see that this is happening, and especially in Europe, Japan, Australia, we see a huge trend, huge positive signals for developing green hydrogen. That is very positive because, as Yue mentioned, the industry needs to scale up. We need strong electrolyzer suppliers and fuel cell manufacturers to decrease the cost, and we need scale too. And through the national hydrogen plan we see in those countries, we see that this is happening. So next, please. So what to do in ASEAN? We saw quickly in the previous presentations what Europe, Australia, and other countries are doing. So I would like to discuss quickly the context of ASEAN. I'm not sure we can see ASEAN as a single area. There is a diversity also in that region. A diversity when we compare countries like Indonesia and Philippines. which have a numerous amount of grids and the other countries. The diversity also in the stage of development and hence capability to finance a green hydrogen development plan. As an example, Singapore may have a better, I would say, capability than other countries to push for certain usage of green hydrogen. So our approach is to push for two types of projects: high power and renewable. High power is a gas to power. From hydrogen, we will produce electricity. As an example, if Singapore wants to decarbonize the grids, we would use a fuel cell as a power plants and to use a green hydrogen from Australia, for instance, to produce electricity, while the renewable power plants can be used in, as an example, in Philippines and Indonesia, where you have a numerous amount of grids which are small and medium-sized, and where it's difficult for the utilities there to diversify the grids, while renewable energies with solar and wind will bring some technical challenges because of the intermittency. And the renewable approach will allow to tackle that issue in a sustainable way. Next slide, please. So what is the renewable power plant in quick words? Because this is our main focus in the region, because again, our ambition is that to implement those projects as a green hydrogen projects in a commercial scale without subsidies. And when we address the right context, we see that the combination of renewable energies, batteries, and hydrogen being made on site will help to deliver to the grid a firm and stable power at high capacity factor. And it can be a great way to diminish the dependence on diesel genset, while PV and wind alone may have difficulties to integrate those grids because of the intermittency. And we see that the hydrogen storage will be able to store electricity for several hours to deliver power 24/7. Next slide, please. So we are developing a pipeline of projects in the region. I give an example here of Indonesia because of this country is a perfect example of the grids diversity and the small and medium-sized grids constraints. We see that in East Indonesia, it can be difficult to diversify the grid and to deliver sustainable power to consumer. And we do believe the renewable power plants can help to decrease the local cost of electricity generation while enhancing the grid stability. But we can say the same about Philippines, where we are developing a pipeline too. So we see our project as a way to help the local industry to grow in green hydrogen, because again, this is commercial scale and sustainable. No subsidies are required, while it's a combination of power to gas, because we manufacture the hydrogen locally, storage, we store the hydrogen on site, and gas to power, the hydrogen becomes electricity to supply power at night, for instance. And that's it for the introduction. And I'm looking forward to talk during the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew, and also I think congratulations with this recent projects being at least is moving with SKF Energy in Indonesia. Once again, thank you very much for panel for your first introductory remarks, and then move to the next stage. So I'm inviting all of our panelists to join the panel discussion, including two lead authors from the report before my colleague Suwanto and Aditya Gilang Baskoro, as well as Dr. Yanfei Li, who are also part of the authors of this report. So a brief introduction to Dr. Yanfei Li. He's an associate professor with the Hunan University of the Technology and Business, and he's also currently a research fellow with the Economic Research Institute for the ASEAN and East Asia area based in Jakarta. He specialized in energy market, energy policy, and economic of technological chain, serving the interests of both academic and public sectors. He wrote many reports as well as contribute opinion articles on the energy development in ASEAN, China, and globally as well. So welcome again, everyone, all the panelists to this discussion. So I will go with some discussion first, question, and then after that, we will also invite the audience, the participant to respond that question. Some of them is already in the Q&A, and then some is being responded already. But later we will pick more. I go back with Dr. Ue. That's going to be I mean, the finding from the report, which I think is also in line with the recent report from the IEA. It's thanks to the progress made in both technology and supply chain, the cost of hydrogen and fuel cell combined for the energy application, such as the fuel cell electric vehicles and fuel cell power plant have been declining fast. Then I'm picking up from the word fast. It's to be. Do you think it's fast enough to play a significant role in the energy landscape in the region? If we are speaking in the context of the Southeast Asia, let's say for the year 2030, is it fast enough to play the role for the region? Dr. Wei, if I can pass it to you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. If you look at the period up to 2030, it's of course, it's next decade, and we've seen for various hydrogen technologies quite some cost reductions over recent years. If we look what's happening with electrolyzers today, but also if you look at fuel cells, we've seen cost reductions of 70% since 2008 for fuel cells for mobility. There are also synergies between some of these technologies. If you look at fuel cells, electrolyzers, sharing the synergies there for future cost reductions to happen. And particularly if you look at 2030, and also if you look at the transport sector, which is of course to some extent challenging, because of the infrastructure we need for the fueling stations and to fuel the vehicles. It could be really, I guess it was also mentioned by Emanuele, if you look at hydrogen valleys or hydrogen hubs like ports, we already have existing hydrogen demand. And if this existing demand is switched to low carbon hydrogen, it can also be an opportunity then to fuel fleets in particular, because fleets or vehicle fleets can lead to high utilization of the infrastructure, and that way are in the near term could be quite attractive if we want to introduce hydrogen into the transport sector. So I guess looking at these existing uses of hydrogen, whether it's refining, whether it's the chemical industry, could be really stepping stones for developing or for the transition to low carbon hydrogen, and also expand the production and use of low carbon hydrogen in the region.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wei. Then if I can continue to Emmanuel, we have seen in your presentation that hydrogen has many uses. Do you believe that some of this use will see a faster adoption of the low carbon hydrogen before FCA, EV, and fuel cell power plant? I mean, or whether this will create competition between the end use? And Emmanuel, your view, please.
Thank you. Yes, like Dr. Hermes said, and as the presentation tried to convey, there are many uses of hydrogen, basically in all the end use sectors. However, the uses differ for some very specific characteristic. One is that some uses are the so-called hard to abate. Now we use this word for something that is hard to electrify actually, because if we ask us 10 years ago, hard to abate was 80% of the power grid. Now we're talking about the fringes of the energy systems, and mostly those uses that needs very high grade heating and where hydrogen is a feedstock, and where we cannot use electricity for that because we need actually hydrogen. A second characteristic is that some uses are centralized and it's a lot of hydrogen within one space instead of being deployed in a large areas with, for example, refueling stations and so on. And and where hydrogen has basically no alternative. So these uses that, just to say, those are refineries, the chemical industry, and high-grade heating and the chemical industry, ammonia and methanol in particular. Those uses are likely to see a use of low carbon hydrogen earlier because it makes sense from an economic standpoint, and the developers that are willing to bet into the energy transition are already trying to adopt some of these options. So they are going to make hydrogen, green, blue hydrogen before other users. But that's not a competition. We should, achieving the energy transition is a matter of collaboration. And the fact that for this industry it makes sense to start now to use hydrogen is a good news, because we are going to have more experience and have a manufacturer of electrolyzers willing to bet to build gigawatt scale electrolyzer manufacturing facilities that will be used for other uses in the future. And looking ahead, first will be shipping and long haul aviation, and then other uses. That's not a matter of competition, it's a matter of complementarity. At the same time, electric vehicles and fuel cells electric vehicles are not in competition for achieving the energy transition. The competition is only within industries that may want to push for their products. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I'm picking the word competition again. It's going to be, then I move with the question, probably with Dr. Yan Peli first. Competition, I mean, it's going to be we are talking about gray, blue, or green hydrogen. I mean, the reports say that the blue hydrogen is seemingly considered as a transition between gray to the green hydrogen. As part of the other report, that considering the potential in situation in this region, what do you suggest the ASEAN should focus? I mean, also allowing them to become a competition as well, or how do you see that? Dr. Lee, your view, please.
Thanks a lot, Benny, for the question. As you know, we together contributed to this report. So my point of view on this question, firstly, is of course I agree with ourselves that we need a strategy to gradually move from gray to blue and then eventually upgrade to green. We have seen many studies arguing that gray hydrogen is pointless because it does not bring credits on carbon emission reduction. However, if you look at this issue strategically, you will realize that, and also if you look into the practices of major countries like Japan, like China, in these countries, companies are actually taking this strategy of making use of cheap gray hydrogen first, in order to actually reduce the initial cost of fuel cell and related applications adoption. Otherwise, hydrogen plus fuel cell would be formidable. The cost would be formidable. We see many cases in these countries, China, Japan, companies are actually running the fuel cell vehicles using byproduct hydrogen. That is also from chemical and other fossil fuel production process byproducts. And they also even use SMR, natural gas SMR process to produce hydrogen in order to fuel these vehicles. So I think this is a practical strategy at the initial stage of development. Then as the infrastructure become widely available and also cheaper, we can adopt a higher grade of hydrogen like blue, like green. I think that's my explanation on some elaboration on the idea.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Yambeli. So it's also same. It should be a competition, right? It should be a collaboration among these three. I passed it Mr. Nabi that maybe Brunei is already started it. Maybe so what is your view on addressing the same question or to Dr. Yanfei before? What is your view on that?
Thank you, Benny. I guess I have the same view as Yanpei. We see that based on our seventh outlook edition, you can see that the ASEAN will continue to depend on fossil fuels in the long term, with that accounting for about 75% share in the 2050 in the business as usual scenario, and only about 25% will actually come from renewables. So I guess if we try to drastically increase to drastically move from gray to blue to hydrogen, will be quite challenging, because by doing so we need to will require a drastic and also quite a significant policy reforms that to encourage embracing the use of the green hydrogen and also clean fuels while maintaining the fossil fuels use. So I guess in anticipating for the decrease in the cost of the green hydrogen in the production, I guess in the meantime, we can suggest that ASEAN should at the moment probably focus on continue to develop gray and blue hydrogen steadily, that will eventually allow for development of hydrogen-based industries, and also on the offtake opportunities for example, developing policies for FCVs, and also try to expand and also develop the use of hydrogen in the co-firing with the natural gas in the existing, and also to develop new gas-fired power plants that could be capable of co-firing it with hydrogen. So that's my take on that.
Thank you, Mr. Nabi. But then, talking more practical, I recall back from Matthew that you from your presentation that somehow, you highlighted the FDF energy demonstrate that the green hydrogen project can be implemented today, right? Or at a commercial scale in Indonesia without subsidies, and then but you also say that in the right context. So we mind to explain more on this right context.
Yeah. So I gave the example of Indonesia, but this is not the only country we are addressing. We can say the same for Philippines or some areas in Vietnam, Cambodia, and other countries. So firstly, what I would like to say is that hydrogen has extra added value to batteries on the storage capability, let's say. It can deliver megawatt hour for a long time. And hence, it can accompany the development and the integration of renewable energies into grids in a larger amount than the traditional way to store electricity. And when we look at Indonesia, it was your question, we see that in East Indonesia, there are many grids which are not that big. They are from a couple of megawatts to 50, 100 megawatt capacity. And we see that when there is no hydro or geothermal resources, it can be very difficult to develop renewable energies because of the intermittency of solar and wind. That is true in Indonesia, but it's also true in French islands, the Spanish ones, worldwide. When you have a medium-sized grids above a certain level of intermittent renewable energies, it's difficult to balance the grid. And in such context, we see that most of the electricity generation is made of a diesel genset. It's somehow easy to carry, to transport. You have engines, you bring the fuel, you produce electricity, but it's very costly because of the logistic, because of the fuel itself. There is the volatility of the cost also. So in such context, we do believe that the hydrogen produced on site can tackle the burden of renewable energies development and can tackle the intermittency factor. So we will produce hydrogen on site to combine with renewable energies to diminish the dependence on diesel genset. And that's why the context is important, because in such context, it's viable.
Thank you. Thank you very much for explaining that. I pass to the Aditya. That's going to be any also additional finding from your report about this right context on the implementation of the hydrogen project.
Yes, I think to produce the lowest cost of hydrogen, we have to simulate what is the best scenario to produce the lowest cost of hydrogen. But in current condition, the issue is still on the capital cost of the production, the capital cost of production plant of hydrogen itself, and we're expecting that then we simulate the scenario on 2030 if the price of renewable energy is decreasing significantly, so it will become the right context to develop the green hydrogen. So I think this is the matter of the cost of the capital and also the energy source to generate the hydrogen.
Thank you. As you are mentioning about the capital, then if I may go back to Mr. Nabi, that's going to be the Brunei's project, right? It's considered the star the starting point in ASEAN countries that where the consortium of Japanese companies launched the world's first global hydrogen supply at the Brunei Sungai Liang Industrial Park hydrogenation plant. So the product will subsequently shipped by the sea to Japan. It's still, it says demonstration project, right? But so how economic this demonstration projects in the future?
Can see back, thank you, Ben. Can see back in the history that, I think in the 1990s that the transportation of hydrogen was quite a difficult task to do. And now that the shipping hydrogen is generally, you see that it's more challenging than shipping coal and oil and also LNG due to its lower temperature requirement. So see that if we like to ship the hydrogen, must be about 100 degrees Celsius lower than that of the LNG. But I think the concept of using the methane cyclohexane (MCH) as a carrier has enabled hydrogen to be safely and also economically stored and also transported over quite a long distances, as we have witnessed here in the demonstration project between Brunei and Japan. And also the good thing is that it also utilizes existing infrastructures and vessels, and also it's quite easier to handle. So knowing that the technology is almost ready for commercialization, then the consortium is also now moving into semi-commercialization by mid-2020s, also with the aim to reduce costs through economies of scale. And from that, you can see that Australia also is recently in talks with the Japanese counterparts to produce green hydrogen from water electrolysis in Australia. And also they are planning to make use of the similar technology that Japan has deployed in Brunei to transport green hydrogen to Japan through tankers. So we can see that in the future, it will still be economically viable, and coupled that with the decreasing cost of green hydrogen, and by 2050, such technology will be part of the goal to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. So
yeah, thank you, Nabi. That's can I also invite Dr. Yan Veli if you have additional thought as well on this point?
Sure. I think regarding this demonstration project in Brunei, we have this estimation if Brunei exports hydrogen produced from natural gas and then shipped to Japan at a large scale, according to our estimation, as already shown in the report, it's already marginally competitive after arriving on the Japanese shore. However, this is provided that it's producing at large scale. So I don't think that currently at this demonstration scale, we can talk about the economics or the competitiveness. It's just for showing the feasibility of the technology. So it's not about showing the economic viability. If you want to see its economically competitiveness, you have to wait until the scale is there. So that's the first point. Second point is that MCH or liquefied hydrogen, these are new technologies. And therefore, we are seeing as the technologies for transportation of hydrogen, these technologies are still very expensive at the early stage of development. So in the future, we do expect that the cost of this part, transportation part of hydrogen, will come down substantially. Currently, we see that in some cases, cost of transportation over long distance is almost the same as the production of hydrogen. So if this part can be cut substantially, it will further enhance the competitiveness of hydrogen in the future. So in the Brunei case, I think it's very promising. That's the second point. Third point is that in the future, if the transportation cost of hydrogen comes down, that leaves us some room to add the cost of hydrogen production and upgrade it from gray hydrogen to blue hydrogen. That means the current SMR technology, we can add a CCS unit. Then gray hydrogen will become blue hydrogen. By that time, we will see Brunei as an exporter of not only gray hydrogen, but blue hydrogen. So with this point, I think I can conclude that while now we are just doing the demonstration of technology, we have very good reasons to believe that in the future, commercial scale of operation of this kind of project in Brunei will be very promising economically. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Yanni. I mean, but I trigger back to Matthew. That's going to be they mentioned about the features, but from the business perspective, I think you're talking about today, right? So Matthew, if I can circle back to you, that there is an issue of the cost financing issue as well. I mean, you mentioned about before as well in your share. And one of the challenge, or I may say is a challenge, is most of the countries in this region, Indonesia and also including, is a regulated market, right? Then how do you see, I mean, the way to innovate if in this context, Matthew, so that let's say we bring this today, or this is something that can be started today to be practical or implemented. Matthew, can I circle back to you?
Okay, thank you, Benny, for the question. I will answer through different angles. First, on the cost, because there were many comments on the fact that hydrogen is expensive. During one of the first presentation from PAC Adityo, if I'm not wrong, we were seeing some price of hydrogen per kilogram and so on. Though today there is no a unique way to use hydrogen, whether it's gray, blue, green. There are many ways to use hydrogen, and this is not a commodity yet. There is not market price for hydrogen, and the price may depend of the usage also and the context. So about the price, what I would like to say is that yes, sometimes it can sound expensive compared to when you compare green hydrogen to gray hydrogen. Though in certain contexts, as we discussed, this is affordable, and this could be a unique way to integrate a large amount of renewable energies, as an example. In addition to that, I would like to say, related to the price, that blue and gray hydrogen, we discussed that quickly, the comparison. There are contexts where blue hydrogen may have added value, where there is an overcapacity of coal and gas power plants, for instance, and where CCS technology can be a way to use in a sustainable way this power to produce hydrogen, and that will help the industry to grow and the cost to go down. In other contexts, it doesn't make sense to use the coal and gas to produce hydrogen. So it's very important to keep that in mind, that the context is key, whether it's blue, green, gray hydrogen and price. Then the second part of my answer is what we propose. Green hydrogen project is highly innovative. Not in a way it's a new technology. The technologies are not new, though we need to present to the regulator and to the off-taker what is the project, how it's made, and to see how it can be in line with the local regulation. That is key, and this is, I would say, today a bilateral discussion. Tomorrow, maybe the industry can work as one to help regulators in the region to be open-minded toward such projects, to be sure it can be considered from now.
Okay, thank you, Media. I invite back the authors of the report, maybe to Swanto, that do you share the same view with Media or the different finding from the report?
Thank you, Mr. Benny, for the question. And yes, if we come to financial or investment stage, it would be become challenging, particularly in the regulated market like ASEAN region. So what we could suggest is, first, in my opinion, is review like current market to enable a hydrogen penetration. If we needed, we could like adopt a market model from another region or another countries that already apply the hydrogen or has a plan for hydrogen development. And on top of that, we should also make sure that the hydrogen technology readiness is in place, where we could convince that hydrogen can act as a future energy carrier, either from gray or blue or green hydrogen. And then in the second thing is, I think, to ask the willingness to the government to allocate the budget for hydrogen development in the country, because we already have a commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emission, and then we ask the government to allocate budget for it. Or we could also like find external funding by looking for a partnership with other region or countries. It is like a positive collaboration between ASEAN with other region. I think we should not also that other countries has or have already started to develop hydrogen, but then the option is now is whether we choose as a player, user, or just the agents in the global market.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sumanto. Then before we go with the question from the panel, that I look back to Dr. Wei and Emmanuel, because one of you is working also on the Dr. Wei, the World Energy Outlook that has a net zero scenario, and Irena is also with its 1.5 degree pathway. Do you see that the coupling of the hydrogen and renewable energy just give hope with the future of clean or even net zero I know you mentioned it earlier, but this kind of a recipe for the world to achieve the net zero by 2050, and whether it's also applicable to the ASEAN context. So if I can start with Dr. Wu first, perhaps for your view on that, and then after that I pass it to Emmanuel.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would say that, hydrogen is not a silver bullet. I guess it was also illustrated by the panelists, because it's particularly important or can complement renewable electricity where it cannot be directly used in sectors. So like long distance transport, aviation, shipping, but also some heavy industries where really chemical or molecules are needed. So I guess that can complement electrification as a decarbonization strategy. Then also, if we talk about renewables, biofuels, bioenergy can be an alternative in some of these sectors, but it's also limited in terms of sustainable bioenergy supply. If you look at alternative uses for biomass and the land, so I guess that also opens the opportunity for hydrogen to play a role in some of these sectors. And if you look directly at the coupling of renewable and the electricity sector, of course, there's the opportunity to produce hydrogen from renewable electricity, particularly also open the opportunity for countries which have excellent renewable resources, but don't have that much domestic demand, the opportunity to export renewable electricity in the form of hydrogen to other parts of the world. And also for hydrogen's opportunity, as Matthew mentioned before, to provide long-term storage for renewable electricity, because batteries are more suited or better suited for short-term storage, while hydrogen has high losses in the overall storage cycle, but has the benefit that it has very low storage costs in terms of compared to batteries, so you can really store large amounts of electricity in the form of hydrogen also over longer time periods. And maybe another opportunity more in the near term is also for hydrogen if you look at the power sector and also the ASEAN region, which has high shares of fossil fuel power generation in the different national mixes. It's also an opportunity to blend hydrogen, for example, with natural gas, or to co-fire ammonia and coal-fired power plants to as a first step to reduce the emission intensity of some of the existing assets in the fossil-fired power generation. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Dr. Wei. Emmanuel, do you have anything to add on that point?
Thank you. Very little, but yes, you suggested if there is any recipe for green hydrogen for the future. There are thousands of models out there now saying that green hydrogen will have some role by 2050, depending on various assumptions this model take. And we can say this now pretty with some certainty that the green hydrogen will have a role in a decarbonized world. And for all the good reasons that Dr. Remy said, because it can do stuff that electricity cannot do at a scale. At the same time, yes, the Asian region can benefit from that, and for various reasons. One is that if most of the water will turn green, those that will continue investing in fossil fuels will hit a wall where their investment will basically become stranded assets and will become isolated from the rest of the energy system. That is something no energy system wants to become isolated. At the same time, the fact that the region hosts the experience with transporting flammable gases, it's an important asset because they can become the new movers, or at least provide their experience to move this new gas. And that's something we should not forget, in particular when there is the green versus blue debate. Some people want just to put the oil and gas into the south, but they have a lot of value that they can bring into the decarbonized energy transitions, and we should not forget about that. At the same time, investing in green hydrogen and looking at it now, it's important because we don't have much time.
Okay, don't have much time. That's also the question. Right. So we have many questions in the Q&A. So I'm trying to pick some address But it's also very interesting because the report is looking the utilization of hydrogen in power, transport, and also export. So there is a question saying that if ASEAN focus on the hydrogen as the export, right? So how can ASEAN benefit from the CO2 emission reduction? And this is in order to meet Paris Agreement and subsequently not net zero emission for ASEAN. So I think maybe I can recall the ACE colleagues the proposals to also respond it. Maybe to Swanto, if you can respond to this question.
Thank you. So in this report, we have a scenario that the export is hydrogen export is like we already meet with our domestic demand of hydrogen. So yeah, it is definitely that, particularly when the hydrogen is coming from blue or green hydrogen, we can like meet a Paris Agreement to reduce greenhouse gas emission, and also is as the consequence we are looking for towards the net zero emission for all ASEAN countries.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Yes, Adit, if you have additional point on that response.
Yeah, sure. And in this our report, we are considering the export market because currently it's not really practical to develop the hydrogen economies in ASEAN countries because this is too high, and that's why we're considering the export market because in other countries the hydrogen could be used and the technology is ready in the country, and we do have a plan to use the hydrogen domestically as we have presented in our presentation. We have the timeline that the export market is actually used to gain a revenue or profits, then to develop the infrastructure in our region. Then the goal is still to develop the green hydrogen that can be used in our region, so it will benefit the region to reach the the carbon emission reduction level in the Paris Agreement. I think this is my answer.
Right. Well, thank you, Edith. Just a follow-up question on that because we have also audience asking, do ASEAN countries is also export and import? So anything else from Brunei? What else other countries that export and import on hydrogen?
Mr. Rennie, if I can answer.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Adit, please.
Yeah, I think currently, as we know in news in many media, that currently the exporting activity is started by Brunei Darussalam, and for other countries we couldn't find any activities on export on hydrogen. But I think we noticed that several countries such as Singapore and also Malaysia also interested in developing the hydrogen for their for their country as well as for the export activities. I think that's my answer.
Okay. Thank you very much. I mean, we also have many questions from the audience that will be maybe. I mean, there's one interesting question also to all panelists, but I think because we're speaking about the Europe and OECDs, maybe I can circle back Dr. Uwe and Emmanuel that maybe if ASEAN region will be dependent upon gray hydrogen for a long time, this is what we hear earlier, then should the ASEAN government be concerned about their competitiveness, especially when Europe, USA, and other OECD countries are considering implementing a tax on the high carbon products? Maybe I start with Emmanuel first.
I start?
Yeah, I mean, if whether you can respond to that question, Emmanuel.
Yes, no, indeed, it is a matter of concern, I believe, for all the possible importing countries. The current border carbon adjustment mechanism being considered, and all the measures that are being implemented in order to fastly decarbonize the world. But instead of instead of seeing this as a matter of competition, I suggest to start looking at it as a matter of collaboration. The fact that someone is willing to pay more for a low carbon product, for a net zero basic material, it's a symptom that there is money to be spent for this kind of technologies, and that it's a signal that we should not wait for the future for some technologies to become immediately to have a cost parity with the fossil fuel incumbent, and instead of starting now to invest in them. If we waited for cost parity to be achieved for solar PV systems, we will be still waiting for it now.
Thank you. Dr. Wei, you have additional thought on this competitiveness on the pricing, the tax on by Europe and USA or OECD countries?
Yeah, I think, that's really, gray hydrogen to some extent is the situation today, or how hydrogen is being produced and used today already in the chemical and in the refining industry. There might be, of course, some justification if we look at expanding hydrogen use to new users, to new applications, that initially there might not be the blue or green hydrogen being available in that region. So there might be initial period where one has to rely, just to develop a pilot project or a certain project to rely to some extent on hydrogen from unabated fossil fuels. But at the same time, there's a lot of projects already ongoing directly linking hydrogen users directly to green or blue hydrogen. So I guess that's really, I would say, the pathway to follow to focus on the production of low carbon hydrogen, not getting locked into unabated fossil fuel hydrogen production.
Right. Thank you very much. So it's still a challenge also for us in the region. We almost to the end of our session. So just to conclude, we still have a lot of questions, but unfortunately we don't have more time. So for this final session, I just would like to invite every panelist to share your short views. Maybe 1 minute max, please. Your final and closing statement. So to the question so what does ASEAN needs to escalate the hydrogen development in region? Maybe just starting with Mr. Nabi, if I may start with you first.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Benny. What does ASEAN need to do to escalate the development of hydrogen? I think ASEAN needs to start from the top-down approach, and top-down approach means that there should be some sort of political interest from the leaders that are quite important, so that hydrogen networks can be easily established, between the various sectors, particularly those that are in the industries, in the power, and also in the transport sectors. So in this way, I think the set of policies will be easily established, that will also enable economies of scale for hydrogen production, and this will also enable more players to venture into renewable energy production across all the sectors. So I think that's my view on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe I pass it next to Dr. Yan Fei Lee. The same question.
Thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity to make a final conclusion. I think what I would like to add is 3 arguments for policymakers in ASEAN to consider.
Make it short first.
Yeah, why we need to develop hydrogen in ASEAN countries immediately. The first line is that I think this is an opportunity for ASEAN countries to consider leapfrogging into low carbon energy or even zero carbon energy era. The second argument is that we have already talked about this. Hydrogen is complementary to renewable energy. So if you want high level of renewable penetration, hydrogen is almost indispensable. And the third argument is that ASEAN is strategically located in the future trade routes of hydrogen in the global trade, I think. Similar than the global oil and gas trade today, in the future, I think it's also standing strategically between major suppliers and major demand centers for hydrogen energy in the future. So that would be my conclusion. Thanks.
So thank you, Dr. Yanfeldi. Matthew, if I can circle it next to you.
Well, thank you, Benny. A quick words to sum up my view and say that ASEAN countries needs to understand that there are numerous ways to use hydrogen, and it is not all the time expensive. It can be affordable from now, and in those cases, we need regulations which are friendly, which are allowing us to develop fully the projects and to implement those first green hydrogen projects in the region. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. Emmanuel, if I can turn it to you.
Yes, thank you. I also have some ideas on what are the policy pillars for good green hydrogen policy making. And as Matthew said, the first one is priority setting. Identify those uses where hydrogen can provide the most value and in the shorter time. The second point is to develop national hydrogen strategies that look ahead at 2050 and have a clear view on how to decarbonize the power system, the energy system, and all the various sectors using hydrogen, what is to set up what is the actual role of hydrogen by 2050. The third one, which is a topic that we didn't touch too much in this panel, but is very important, is to start developing a certification of origin. Because gray, blue, and green hydrogen will be in competition between themselves only if we really know what is green, what is blue, and what is gray, black, brown, purple, whatever the color palette it is. So we will need also a guaranteed origin system.
Right. Thank you. That's going to be Dr. Wei, your turn, please.
Yes. I guess I don't have that much to add what my co-panelist already said. Maybe just highlighting that these kind of reports like this by ACE on hydrogen are just quite important to define really on a regional level, but also followed up maybe potentially by further studies and reports on a national level to define roadmaps or strategies for hydrogen under the national circumstances to identify really what are the opportunities and challenges in the country for hydrogen, of course, not a silver bullet. For all problems in the energy sector, and potentially not only looking at the use and production of hydrogen, but also looking at the opportunities more at an industrial level. What could be the opportunities for a country along the hydrogen supply chain to develop local industries and then benefit from economic growth and creating jobs from hydrogen. So that would be
right. Thank you. Yeah, it's 4 p.m. So that I think last message from my two colleagues is also is to request everyone feel free to download the report. We are sharing the link in the chat room so everyone can download the report and read the report. Hopefully, we'll be giving some insight about the hydrogen development in ASEAN. I already passed 5 minutes. So for that, allow me to close this panel discussion by thanking each of our great panels, experts joining us, sharing your views, sharing your insight. Dr. Uwe, Nabi, Dr. Yanfeldi, Emmanuel, Matthew, and also my two colleagues, Suwanto and Aditya. Thank you very much for this great discussion. I end this session and I return back to our moderator, Ms. Gabriela. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benny, for the excellent moderation. Also, thank you very much to all panelists, Dr. Wereme, Mr. Emmanuel Bianco, Mr. Nabi Matusin, Mr. Matthew Gies, Dr. Yan Feili, Mr. Aditya Gilang Baskoro, and Mr. Suwanto, for sharing your knowledge and experience with us through in-depth panel discussion. I would also like to thank Dr. Nukia Gyotama and Mr. Jonathan Go once again for opening our webinar today with wonderful speeches. We really appreciate the valuable time and effort from all speakers in contributing to the success of this webinar. I would also like to thank all of the audience for the active participation in today's webinar. I saw a lot of questions in the Q&A box that are left unanswered due to time limitation. But don't worry, you can read our newly launched report on hydrogen in ASEAN, and you can find all the answers to your questions in the report. We have uploaded the report on our website, so feel free to download and use it as your reference. Should you have any further questions related to the report, please do not hesitate to contact us at pfs@aseanenergy.org. Distinguished guests and participants, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we are reaching the end of the webinar. Before closing this webinar, please allow me to share with you a few updates on ACE and ACCEPT upcoming activities. The closest event is the upcoming webinar on launching of ACE reports. This will be another special event where we will launch two reports, namely ASEAN Oil and Gas Updates 2021 and ASEAN Power Updates 2021. The launching event will be held on next Wednesday, September 8, 2021 at 2 p.m. Jakarta time. I can assure you that you will not want to miss this event, as we will give you exclusive updates on the status of oil and gas sector as well as power sector in ASEAN. So don't forget to register yourselves through the link as shown in your screen. My colleague will also help to type it in the chat box so you can access it directly. The following week, after the launching of the reports event, the ASEAN Energy Business Forum, or AEBF 2021, will take place virtually on September 14th until 17th, 2021. ASEAN Energy Business Forum, in conjunction with 39th ASEAN Ministers on Energy meeting, presents the most influential platform convening 10 ASEAN energy ministers and global energy leaders. This platform enables ASEAN policymakers to showcase national energy framework aspirations and discuss how they could work with businesses to realize these goals, thus serving as the perfect platform to foster in-country investment missions, bilateral meetings between project owners, investors, and integrated energy solutions partners. For further information, you can access the link shown in your screen or simply click on the link that will be provided by my colleague in the chat box. On September 15, 2021, the first ASEAN International Conference on Energy and Environment will be held in conjunction with AEBF 2021. For the first edition of AICEE, we have received many abstracts, and we have also selected abstracts for full paper submission and paper presentation during the conference. We're hoping that this initiative could be a platform for Triple Helix collaboration for research activities with the main topic of ASEAN energy transition with resiliency in the post-pandemic climate change era. The event will be held through ACE YouTube channel and the MG event. For more details, please check the event page or also email at aiceeinfo@aseanenergy.org. My colleague will provide both link and email in the chat box. Today's webinar is endorsed by the ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project, or as we call it, ACCEPT. One of ACCEPT's activities is the ASEAN Researchers Network on Energy and Climate Change, or ARNEC. It is a group of scholars, analysts, and other stakeholders gathered in an interdisciplinary forum for the discussion on social, economic, governance, and technical issues related to energy and climate change. If you are interested, you can register via the link on the far right. For more details on the project, you could also access our various social media as shown in your screen. Distinguished guests and participants, ladies and gentlemen, now we have reached the end of the webinar. Once again, on behalf of the ASEAN Center for Energy, I would like to thank all speakers and participants for the extensive discussion today on the newly launched report